With this time, I go for mine. I get to shine. Now throw your hands up in the sky. I go for mine. I get to shine. Now throw your hands up in the sky.
Oh, hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Startups. We don't have an entrepreneur on this week. Well, sort of an entrepreneur. We have a thinker, a communicator, is a longtime friend of mine who I met, I think in 1994, 95, when I was 23, 24 years old. Happened to meet through some mutual friends. We made a connection. We've been friends ever since. And this is the person I talk to when I don't know how to deal with a person or a situation, or I'm confused about how I need to negotiate a situation. Not negotiate on a business level, but negotiate on a human level. So I'm really excited to have Mark Goulston here. Welcome to the program.
So does that mean when people catch you not listening, they get to complain to me?
Yeah, basically, if anybody has a problem with me not listening or behaving badly in general, which is probably 20% of the time, call Mark and he'll do an intervention with me. But one of the few people I would say, actually, I would consider a mentor. There's very few people actually I look to get advice, but I actually call you sometimes on your cell phone. We get a cup of coffee, and I say, "This is the situation I'm dealing with. What do you think? How would you deal with it?" So, is that what you do? What do you do exactly for a living? I know you're a psychiatrist, but you write all these books. How do you describe yourself as your profession?
Well, someone branded me a few days ago and they said, "Mark, you are a CEO whisperer."
Ah. So like the horse whisperer, but with CEOs.
Right, right. And so I think what happens is I meet with CEOs and senior management, and they tend to open up to me. And I think very quickly it's clear to them that when I believe in them, I have their back. And also I make it kind of difficult for people to hide. I don't do that on purpose, but I listen between words, and part of that comes from my clinical background as a shrink. Right,
so you're a shrink, and then you act as sort of a coach or a mentor, or just somebody, a sounding board for other CEOs. So I'm not the only CEO who talks to you about how to deal with situations and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, just one thing, the sound is so loud out there that it's echoing a little bit back, so you may want to just turn it down just a little bit. It's the first time we've ever done a live audience, so there's a live audience out there. For people who are watching on Ustream, there's probably 30 people out in the room here, probably go to 100 people. We'll have a book signing afterwards. We got some copies of the book. We're able to get them FedEx here. We got a Mahalo pack for everybody with a beach towel in it or something, since we're in Santa Monica. And you'll sign the books and schmooze everybody and have a glass of wine or something after the podcast, right?
Absolutely.
That's part of the
deal. Very
deal.
generous of you.
Well, it's the least I can do. So I wrote up a list of things that we've talked about. We've had a lot of conversations. And I wrote down the list of things that I sort of have read your email alert, because you do an email alert every week, which is Usable Insights. Is that at usableinsights.com or at markgoulston.com?
Markgoulston.com. People can see my blog if they go there.
Right.
And they can RSS feed that.
Yeah, so if you go to markgoulston.com, I pulled it up on my screen here, every week or every couple of days, you do an email alert that I get in my BlackBerry. And it could be something from the news, maybe somebody was kidnapped and how they're going to have to deal with it. It could be something about the war. It could be something about business. It's kind of runs the gambit. So highly recommend people sign up for that. But let's talk about the book as well. You have a book that just came out. And what number book is this? Because you've done a couple of books.
This is my fifth book.
Fifth book. And this one is Just Listen. Tell us, what is the premise of the book? Why did you write this book?
Well, I wrote this book because as I go out in the world, I realize that very few people are listening. Everybody wants to be listened to, but nobody is lining up to do it. And in fact, I had this kind of realization, which will probably be coming to a blog near you soon, in which I started looking at people, even though I'm very interpersonally oriented, I started looking at people as if they were modems.
Modems.
And if you think of what a modem is something that connects you to the internet, connects your computer to the internet. And everyone who has a modem has had to disconnect it at times, power it down, reconnect it, and reboot. And what I realize is people are just like modems in the fact that they're conveying data points between them and other people, and everyone is overloaded.
Right.
And when people are overloaded and you try to push anything through, they can't do it anymore. In fact, my mind's overloaded. So when my wife asks me to do something in the morning, and she says, "Don't forget this," I invariably forget my wallet, my keys, because I don't have much bandwidth in my head. And so I wrote Just Listen, because what I realized is as I sat with people, especially CEOs, and they felt me listening to them, as you're kind of doing now, but
right.
we'll do that offline,
right.
is I started hearing things in between the words. And as I started hearing things in between the words, I heard what they're really worried about. And something that I've been hearing recently that I think is pertinent to a lot of startups is what someone shared with me in the last couple months is that an opportunist does not a visionary make. And I said, well, what does that mean? Right. And this person said to me, I was quick enough and smart enough to seize an unseized opportunity, and now everyone in the world expects me to be a visionary, and I'm not. And I feel the pressure to be a visionary, but I'm not. I make a parallel that Microsoft and Apple started off both as pirates, but Steve Jobs turned out to be a visionary.
Right.
And so he can keep seeing into a future that never happened. Whereas Microsoft, I think, has trouble because it's more of an opportunist organization.
Right.
And I think what happens with a number of the founders, and you being the exception,
right.
are people who they will seize an opportunity, they'll get there first, and that gets you some runway. But only if you see a vision of something that no one else has seen, and a vision of a possibility, do you have enough runway to make it a reality. Where seizing an opportunity, scurrying, lining up everything, closing the deal, maybe you can get in there, but then the competitors are going to come in, they're going to compete with you, and then you're going to lose that advantage. I remember something I wrote about in the book, Just Listen, is I went to a town meeting in which Tom Stenberg was talking about founding Staples. He was the originator of Staples. And I went there, by the way, with the express purpose of trying out a tip that someone shared with me. And someone said, if you want to make a connection with thoughtful people who are at conferences, go there and be the first person to ask a question when questions are asked for. Because I know as a speaker at conferences, when I finish my comments, and they ask for questions and no one asks a question, the last thing I think is I've been profound.
Right.
And so I was
It's always the scary moment when you're at the conference and there's does anybody have a question?
Absolutely.
Please, does anybody have a question?
Anyone, anything.
Please, ask anything.
Right.
Ask what time the cocktail party is, but please don't make my talk so terrible that there's no questions. And then, of course, somebody will break the ice. But this person had it as a technique. Go ask a question.
Well, I think he was an observer. He was both as a speaker and someone who's participated. He says, geez, I know that anxiety. So I went there, and I was really impressed with Tom Stenberg when he told the story of Staples. But I was there to try out that technique. And I remember it was in a Staples store at Mid-Wilshire inside Los Angeles. And I remember it was getting to the end of comments. It was a panel of the Small Business Bureau from Washington to come in, and there was Tom in the middle of it. And it was coming towards the point where they're going to ask for questions, and the person was walking around with a microphone. Now, I've trained hostage negotiators, so I'm pretty quick on my feet. So when he was fiddling with the microphone, as soon as he said, does anyone have any, I said, I have a question, and I hadn't formulated the question yet.
Right.
But I'm kind of quick on my feet. So he's making his way through the crowd, and I'm thinking, what would I want to know, and what would Tom want to talk about?
Right.
And the question I asked, which gets back to this founder and opportunist thing, I said, Tom, if you had it to do over again, what is something that you wished you had done differently that would have saved you a lot of hassles later on when you founded Staples? And the interesting thing about asking questions that cause people to think is you can convert a transactional conversation into something more. So in other words, if you can ask a question that causes people to pause, stop looking at your eyes and look up like they want to listen to it, you can feel the energy change. And so he looked up and he smiled, meaning it triggered something that he wanted to think about. And then when he came down, he looked at me, and I had all his attention. No one else in the audience was he looking at. And he said, what I would have done differently is I would have had more of a competitive advantage before I tried to get money. Because what occurred is people steal ideas. And so I got in before I had that head start, and I had to beat 25 competitors, which made it more difficult. And it was such a wonderful question, the people in the panel wanted to answer it, and then Tom said, wait, I've got another answer. And I said, Tom, what's the other answer? And he said, well, we pride ourselves in being tuned into our customer. And something we missed the boat on was home delivery. I should have known that women hate carrying these big boxes of paper up 3 flights of stairs, and that's what we pride ourselves on, and we missed the boat, and Office Depot beat us, but we'll catch up, and so I would have done that. But that's an example of the difference between, I think, a visionary and an opportunist. So you have a lot of wannabes who've crowded that field, but I think Tom is one of the visionaries in that kind of field. And I think that's the anxiety of a lot of founders, is they know they may be a one-trick pony, but no one else knows that.
Well, that's the classic thing for a lot of people who are actors or directors or Hollywood people. I mean, everybody at some point looks and says, God, I've been pushed up on this pedestal. Am I a fraud? Do I deserve to be on this pedestal? So, you know, when I did my first business, Silicon Valley Reporter, it was incredibly successful incredibly quickly, and I was wondering, gee, wow, do I deserve all this adulation to be in magazines and profiled in the New Yorker? And then when it all comes down, when the dot-com crash happened, boy, you're just left there saying, what just happened? I was the king of the world, king of New York, and now, gosh, the Twin Towers have been knocked down, and I'm sitting here with, you know, having laid off 50 employees. What is life all about? I mean, this is the quintessential entrepreneur moment. Are you going to lay down? Are you going to give up? Or are you going to, you know, try again and see if you've still got it, if it was just a one-time thing? I mean, in most cases, is it a one-time thing? I mean, even the great people, they must have, I mean, Steve Jobs started with one thing.
I think it depends on who they are. And I think one of the things that I certainly admire about you is you took the hit like everyone else did when the dot-coms burst. How come you didn't bunker? Why didn't you hide? What was different? Because I think people viewing want to know, you know, how do you have resilience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, yeah, wow, we got to think about that for a second. Now you got me you just did that thing where you got me thinking about it. So now I can just sit back. Wow, yeah. Now I got to think about that for a second. Why don't you give up? Yeah, I mean, part of it is I think I've only ever worked. I've never had a moment in my life where I wasn't working. So the state of sort of goofing off, to me, is very anxiety producing. If I'm on a beach for it's the second day or the third day and we're not doing something, that's terrible. That's not vacation to me. That's torture. Like, we're going to literally sit on a beach and do nothing for the third, fourth day in a row. Can we at least like go get jet skis or go shoot some guns or, you know, go snowmobiling or do some activity or read a book or play chess or something? So I think that was the main reason. But also, and we've talked about this before, my dad had businesses when I was growing up, and I watched him lose a business, and he didn't get back up, you know? He sort of gave up after he lost his business and just went to work for other people. And so once I had seen that, I was just like, God, I can't give up. I got to do it for my dad at least. I got to fight through it. And that's when I started the second business, Weblogs Inc., which, you know, everybody said when I did Silicon Valley Reporter, I got lucky. And then when the blog company happened, and that started to work, everybody said the same thing in the beginning, that'll never work. Then they said it was an obvious idea. And then they said I got lucky again. So it's almost like you're always, with the detractors, fighting against this never-ending stream of people don't understand your idea at the beginning. Then when they start to understand, they say it's never going to work. Then when you finally prove it's going to work, they say you got lucky. What is, you know, how do entrepreneurs, because a lot of them listen to the program, it's the majority of the audience, how do they deal with that? You know, and what separates the people who can deal with it, who can't? Like, what are the techniques? Because I know it's never ending, and now that you have this open internet with blog comments and Twitter, I mean, everybody's under constant attack and criticism from anonymous people. I mean, it's got to be grinding on people. Is it a different psychological dynamic that occurs today on the open internet than before the internet? Do you find people coming to you to talk about stuff saying, I can't deal with this pressure anymore? It's you know, living in public and all this pressure is different than maybe the old days when you were private.
As I talk to any CEO, founder, senior manager, anyone who's made a breakthrough in their life, when I ask them, was it preceded by a breakdown, people will invariably make the connection. In fact, one of my heroes is a fellow named Jim Mazzo. Jim Mazzo is the now Senior Vice President of Abbott Medical Optics. He was the chairman and CEO of Advanced Medical Optics, and they were recently acquired by Abbott. But a couple of years ago, when he was the chairman and CEO of Advanced Medical Optics in Orange County, he had a product that was damaging corneas. And as soon as he found out about it, and it was all over the Wall Street Journal, he took the product off. He didn't check with his board, he didn't check with anything. It was like the fellow who took Tylenol off the market many years before. And I called Jim, and I think this is what we all strive to be. I called him that day to tell him how much I admired him. You know, without checking what the hit was going to cost them, he did the right thing. And I actually write about it in the book, Just Listen, because I was just so admiring. And this was his response. The day after, you know, he was just scoured by the Wall Street Journal, he said, "Mark, I'm giddy with excitement."
Giddy with excitement?
I'm giddy with excitement. I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I'm excited." I said, "I think you better close the door there."
Yeah.
And he said, "You know, Mark, we do the right thing here. We have a great business plan. We have a good code of conduct, good code of ethics. I mean, we do everything right here. And it's inevitable that you hit these roadblocks. And I know that this is going to make our company and me better in ways that I don't yet know. And so what I'm excited about is that always in my career, the great breakthroughs were preceded by this. And I'm excited because I don't know how it'll make me better." And it was interesting because one of the things I've discovered in writing a lot of my books, my earlier books were Get Out of Your Own Way and Get Out of Your Own Way at Work. Probably the best lesson I've ever heard in dealing with setbacks is that when I hit one, what I now say to myself, because I don't like the feeling, kicks me in the stomach, and I say to myself, don't do anything to make it worse for 48 hours. Because I'm tempted to do something, to get angry, to blame myself. But I keep saying to myself probably 25 times a day, don't do anything to make it worse. Because what happens is in 2 days, I will discover something that I never would have discovered had I not had the breakdown. And if I do that thing to make it worse, I won't discover that breakthrough because I'll be too busy having to deal with all the people I offended, ticked off, the going off the wagon in some eating or exercise. And so that will obscure the discovery. And it's interesting because I do a fair amount of strategic planning with companies, with founders who will whisper into my ear as the CEO whisperer, I think I need a new vision. I think I am an opportunist. And the good news is if you can be that humble and open to that, you don't have to be the visionary. You can bring in other people. There is a distinct process. And it's one of the ways to most embolden and re-enthuse your people if they get to participate in what the vision will be. And you can do that. The problem is that a lot of people who are seen as visionaries don't want to admit to anyone except a CEO whisper, I think I'm a one-trick pony.
Yeah, see, I think that's an immature, like first-time CEO who thinks their ideas, they overvalue the ideas. And they don't realize they can come from everywhere. You know, your best ideas might come from your customers. If the person who did, was it Staples or Office Depot?
Staples.
Staples. I mean, if you had just listened to a customer say, my God, this paper is too heavy to climb up the stairs with. If one person in the organization had, listened to that customer or to the person who works at the register, that would have been apparent. They would have known immediately, but probably didn't have that ability to sort of allow the ideas to come from other places. Is that the problem? Is there sort of a pressure that you as the founder have to come up with the great ideas, the brilliant ideas, because that's your value? And if it doesn't come from you, what is your value to the business? Is that the sort of catch-22 that founders are in?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you made a good point, which should sell mucho of my books, is that as a founder, you often listen. You listen for the opportunity, but then when you go from a founder to startup CEO, you stop listening because suddenly all these things are intruding on you. And actually one of the problems that I see for a lot of startup founders is often what they know and how it all fits together so clearly in their mind, but often they can't articulate the tasks and the functions for people, so they hire people and they expect those people to be mind readers. And what happens is if you have a lot of energy, those people aren't mind readers. They're afraid to stand up to you, so often they will nod like they understand what you're saying. And something that I coach all my founders to do, and it's a real rude awakening. When you assign something or delegate something to someone, instead of saying, do you understand what I need you to do? If you were to ask them, what do you understand?
Right.
And so I would advise you to do that. What do you understand about what we just talked about? And take it a step further and say, and why is it important
You
that
see,
we
that's
do
the
that?
key, is explaining the why behind this is what I need you to do. And I remember in my first business, you know, I was just so driven with the Silicon Valley Reporter that I'd say, just write this article, here are the 5 points, get it done, I need it by 5 o'clock. And then, you know, when I got to my second business, it was bloggers who are uncontrollable. You know, I had no control over them. They would either work for us or not, but they weren't employees like at a magazine, which is sort of a metaphor for the media business, but also being a better manager is the sort of herding of cats as opposed to, you know, the top-down structure. And with the bloggers, we had to say, the goal is to get people more engaged, to get them talking about Engadget or to talk about Joystick. So we need posts that are viral. And what does viral mean? Well, here are 5 examples of viral posts, and we would break down, this is why this one is viral, because the title of it is memorable and easy to say over the phone, and there's a video associated with it, and it's very easy to click this button to share it. And really starting to explain to them that the success of the blog was based on their creativity and naming the post and all these little nuances and details. But that was much easier, and that was much more enjoyable as a manager than just telling people and grinding them, just do this, just do this.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm flashing on my internship, my medical internship, because I am an MD. And I remember that was a tough year, and in that year we had to learn 50 life-saving procedures. And one of the ways that information was transmitted, and when I do coaching with senior managers, I suggest they do this, it was called see one, do one, teach one. So if I was an intern and I had a resident above me, I'd watch him do a spinal tap. I'd do one under supervision where he would take my hands and he'd cover them and say, do you feel the pop? Well, you're into where the fluid is. You don't have to push any further. But the key to owning it was when I taught the medical student. And I think we don't have time to do that, but if you take the time and if you ask the person you're delegating something to, what do you understand of what I've just told you, and why is it important to our strategy? Now you might say, I don't have enough time, I just want them to do things. Well, if you have to tell them 3, 4 times.
Right, it's much easier to just say, hey, let's have a discussion about it. Why is this a good idea in your mind? Do you have any better ideas for doing this? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
what I always do. I'm begging my people. I mean, I have one of the folks I work with here at Mahalo, I'm always begging him. He knows who he is because he's in there. Give me an idea. What are the ideas? You can explain why it's not going to work so articulately. You're so smart. But can you just give me an idea? Give me a couple more ideas of how we could solve this problem, because innovation is what startups are about. That's your advantage. When you're a startup company, you don't have the cash. You don't have the thousands of employees. What you have is the ability to hustle and move quickly and make a decision and get an idea out there before the big company. So if you're, and that's your whole competitive advantage. So if you're not leveraging that as a startup, you're by definition going to lose. You're not going to be able to compete with the big boys if you're behaving like them, just sort of droning on. I want to get back to the point that you made earlier, and I just want to remind the audience, if you are on Twitter, you can just use the hashtag #, TWiST, This Week in Startups, TWiST, and you can ask a question to Mark. If you're here in the live audience, you can put, I'm in the live audience, here's my question for Mark, #TWiST, and I will be reading on my Twitter here, and you can see there's actually a lot of people who are listening right now. I think actually, I'm watching it go by, and it's just every couple of minutes, 10 more people are quoting some of the things you're saying, which is kind of interesting. You were talking at the beginning about people being modems. And this thing is fascinating to me because I experience this a lot. And I think I have the experience, I do this to other people, which is you're so overwhelmed. You got your BlackBerry, your iPhone, Twitter, and the modem is clogged up. People are communicating with each other, but they're not getting their point across. They're not listening. It's almost like we're communicating, we're sending so much information, but receiving so little. we're understanding so little. I mean,
well, what's happening is we're venting and we're talking at and we're talking over, but as you say, nothing's been received. Let me share a quick anecdote that I had with a CEO, and it'll give you an idea of what unplugging a modem and also connecting to a CEO who I now call another one of my friends. It was difficult getting an appointment with this fellow. Very busy, and when I was with him, it was clear that the last thing he wanted to do was be with me. And he was preoccupied, and he didn't look at me once. And as you know, I can sometimes take people on and take you on, and
Sure.
I try to be respectful, but I can be rather direct. And imagine this, a big football player type of guy, and I looked at him, I said, "How much time you got for me?" And he said, and he looked at me like, "I think it's just about up." Right. But I knew I had about 30 seconds, and I said, "No, how much time do you have?" And he's like this, and he says, 20 minutes. And I looked at him, and I said, "We're into minute 3. There's something on your mind that's much, much more important than our meeting, and I think our meeting is worth your undivided attention, which you can't give me because there's something else in your mind that you should take care of. So here's the deal. Let's stop now, take the remaining 16 minutes, take care of whatever's on your mind. We'll reschedule this, or you'll never see me again if I've been too rude.
Right.
But take care of what's on your mind. Your modem is clogged. I didn't say modem, but you're all clogged up.
Right.
So that you can listen to people like me or people in your company." Now he looked at me, and he started to tear up. And I said to myself, "Mark, you said to yourself, leave your shrinking in in your shrink room. You can't make these grown men cry all over,
Right.
All over the corporate world,
Right.
So I'm saying, what did I do now?" And he looked at me and he said, and he looked right at me. He said, "You've known me for 4 minutes, and there's people 25 yards from here who've known me for 15 years, and you know something that they don't know because I'm rather private. My wife's having a biopsy today, and it looks like it's going to be really bad news. And my wife's stronger than me, and she said, you go to work. So I'm at work, but I'm really not here." And I said, "Well, maybe you should be with her. I'm sorry, but maybe you should be with her." And again, this big footballer, it was like a dog coming in from the rain. He went like this. And then he looked at me, and he got very centered, and he said, "I'm not as strong as my wife, but I'm pretty strong. I served 2 tours in Vietnam, and you've got my undivided attention, and you've got your full 20 minutes.
Nice.
So do you see what happened there is that if you can listen when someone's not able to listen to you and not keep pushing, you might get through. I love great quotes, and my favorite quote of all time, and if we're getting people writing down things, if I was a betting person, people are going to write this down and you can check. It's my favorite quote of all time. And it comes from a psychoanalyst named Wilfred Bion. And he said, "The purest form of communication is to listen without memory or desire." Because when you listen with memory, you have an old agenda that you're trying to plug people into. When you listen with desire, you have a new agenda that you're trying to plug people into. But you're not listening to their agenda. You're pushing your own. And if you can cultivate that you're there to be of service, to have a product or a service that really solves the problem of your target market, and you care about that more than how you're going to maneuver them to get more money in your pocket, it's amazing how people will just be drawn to you. And Just Listen is all about how to create that space where people are drawn towards you. It's dedicated to my mentor, by the way. My mentor is Warren Bennis. Warren Bennis is to leadership what Warren Buffett is to investing, what Bill Gates is to the internet space. I mean, you can't get any better than Warren Bennis. And in the dedication, he says, when you listen and get where people are really coming from, and you care about them when you're there, they're more likely to let you take them where you want them to go.
So let's talk a little bit about motivating people on your team. This is a big, people talk about motivation all the time in startup companies. You need to have motivated people. You have to killer people, a killer instinct, who are just motivated to kill it every day. And it seems like not everybody's always motivated. I mean, people ebb and flow. Companies ebb and flow. You know, sometimes you feel like you're going to take on the world. The next day you might feel like, God, we're totally incompetent. We can't get anything done. It's a disaster. Servers are down. How do you maintain a high level of sort of energy and motivation in a startup company? Because I think it's necessary. I'm pretty sure it's necessary. You can't have a low energy startup company. I mean, you have to be high energy and trying to in order to compete, because you're not doing it in a bubble, right? And you have a limited amount of time to make something happen. The clock is ticking. You have a certain amount of venture funding. It's not like, you know, a charity or something like that. So how do you maintain that sort of spirit and that energy amongst a team? What are the techniques that startups can use?
Well, no one's going to like this, but I'm sort of a truth sayer. I'm not just a CEO whisperer, I'm a truth sayer.
No.
I think if you stop abusing your people that is based on your fear that your company is going to fail, it's amazing how the motivation can come back. So if you can recognize the most demotivating things that I see over and over again with startups, one of them is you're out there in the world and you see the opportunities and you come in and you spin your people. I mean, you just get them agitated, and what happens is they won't confront you because they're afraid of you. And so you keep spinning them, you expect them to read your mind, and I think one of the most discouraging things, and I've seen this in a number of companies, is you'll come in and you won't even know what your people are already doing, and so you often have 5 people serving you, the founder, because you came in and say, we get this opportunity from such and such.
Right.
And then they compare notes because they've all dropped what they were supposed to be doing to serve you and that energy. It is one of the most discouraging and demotivating, and I think it's abusive if you want to see yourself as an entrepreneur. So I think if you recognize some of those things and remove them, one of the greatest tragedies I see in startups is that too many founders kill their young and smart people. They set them up to fail. And something that I wrote, which I think was the top question, is that I think firing is a failure of leadership. It's a failure to take the time to hire the best person, put them in the right position, and then if you get good people, to give them the skills to succeed. And they're not going to tell you that they're afraid they don't have the skills because they're too busy being afraid of you. Give them the skills to succeed, and then give them the capacity to use those skills, because there's a number of people who have skills, but they don't have any time because they're serving 9,000 masters, not to mention all the people pulling them at home. And something else that I see with a number of founders is many of the founders I know are incredibly smart and are incredibly incentivized to succeed, and they just don't get when their people aren't as smart as them or as incentivized, and they just don't get it.
I think this is a critical piece. I mean, you said like 5 things there, and like each one I want to spend like 10 minutes on. So I'll start with the last one, which is when you're out of sync with somebody maybe you've hired. So they don't have the same financial incentive that you do, and maybe they don't have as much experience. I don't want to say smarter, but maybe experience, wisdom. Maybe it is raw smarts. I mean, if somebody's got 15, I'm smarter now than I was 15 years ago, so I guess somebody working for me who's got 15 years less experience, it's okay to say they're not as smart about building a company at least, and maybe they have the raw IQ. So in that case, stock options and these kind of things, explaining to them the value of those options and what that can mean for their career, I find is critical. I mean, those are the techniques that I've found will resonate with a young person. I will take a young person and say, listen, when I was coming up, nobody ever took me on the side and explained, this is an incredible opportunity. So I had to like basically guess at what were the incredible opportunities in my life. I'm telling you right now, this company is going to be big, in all likelihood. These stock options are going to be worth something if we do our job. This is what we need to do. And you are going to take a couple of years out of your career path if you work really hard and just focus for the next 36 months on this company and kill it. And when I started doing that, it was almost like people were just like, oh my God, this person is looking out for me. This person has my back. Jason actually cares about my future, which is true, I do. I mean, I care about my people and how they do. That's why I give them stock options in the company and don't just pay them a salary. And taking the time to explain to them, this could be the critical juncture in your career. This might, I believe that so much. We started putting that in our ads to find people, that this job could take 3 to 5 years out of your career path because we're going to throw you in the deep end of the pool and you're going to learn so much. But what happens when you find somebody and they don't care about that. I mean, because that's what I run into sometimes. Young people, and I don't know if I'm old enough, I'm just saying young people today, you know, are just terrible, but it does seem like young people today are terrible. They're not motivated. I mean, my generation, I guess Generation X, we seemed like we were just so hardworking for the man, and we were just like drones. Like, oh, we're happy to have a job. We're going to just totally do what our bosses say, and greed is good in the 80s. But now there's this other generation that's coming up, and it's hard, I think, for them to see value in being entrepreneurial, for being, you know, hardworking, to making money, to being successful. It's almost like those things are been deprioritized, and some other, you know, granola soft, like your experience in life and your fulfillment is what's important. It's almost like those people, which I understand to a certain extent, but they don't seem to get that there are opportunities to do epic things in your life and change your life and pull yourself up to a whole nother level. Is this just me? Or well, do you think this is valid? I mean, you have kids who are...
Something I make a big point about is that I think when you're trying to get through to people, you want to be more compelling and less convincing. You're very convincing. I mean, you'll drive things home, and the cow has left the barn in terms of really listening to you. They've shut down, and then what happens is when you sense they've shut down, you drive further until you put every nail in the coffin. So what it is you're very smart, and you can come up with a convincing case, but you miss out on making it compelling. One of the things that I will do with people that are talented, and I only want to work with people now who are excellent. Excellent as defined by they will exceed the expectations of all the people they do that excellent thing for. That's now my discerning thing that I'm looking for. And then the leverage I use is I will often say, do you know how good you are at this particular thing? You know, and then we'll say, well, I don't know. And then I'll say, no, this is what you're good at, and you are dishonoring a gift. Now, if you want to dishonor the gift, one of the perks that I have that you don't have because you're in this company is I get to walk away and you don't. But what happens is that gets to them. In fact, one of the models that I use for leadership and to build the best people possible is Earl Woods and Tiger Woods. I think Tiger Woods is probably the best athlete that's ever lived. And from everything I read about his dad, he could be one of the best dads that ever lived. And I think the message to Tiger was, you have a gift, and we could honor that gift, and you could become better at that than has ever been. And I don't think Earl Woods was a stage dad. I mean, he was in special forces. He was a good guy. And I think what happened is Tiger saw that opportunity. So what am I getting at? I think when you're drilling at people, this is an opportunity, I'm giving you options, you're not even giving them the chance to pause and realize, wow, this is one of those companies where I'm employee number 5 or 7 or 23 or 28, oh my God. But again, I think sometimes in that effort to cram it down their throat, you don't give them the opportunity to discover it on their own. And when they discover it on their own, it's amazing. One of my other colleagues, a friend of mine named David Rock, he has this 4-step process of influencing people. And what he talks about, and I really think about this when I'm with people and I want to influence them, and the 4 stages, you need to change their awareness of something from what it currently is. So if someone's just looking at themselves as, well, you know, I'm in an internet company, yeah, we get stock options. If you need to change the awareness of, you're an owner, and your employee, you know, we have 50 people, you're employee number 40. Number 40 at Microsoft is worth $200 million. And so you need to change the awareness. The second step is what he calls reflection, meaning they have to sort of think about it like, wow, I never thought about it that way. Wow, an owner. Wow, employee number 35 at Mahalo. And then the third step is they have to get some insight. So the insight takes them in where they start to think and they say, gee, if I really work hard and I tell my spouse and family, I may have to put in a lot of time on the weekends. And I'm sorry if I'm not there for all the games, but this is an opportunity. I know that Mahalo's going to become Google, but I'm employee number 18. And then it's from that that they take action. So in the back of my mind, the framework when I'm trying to influence people is how can I change their awareness of something that causes them to reflect on it. You did that about 30 minutes ago when I asked you that question, and you caught me and you smiled and you said, oh, you made me think about it, about my resilience.
Right.
And then the insight is, and we'll do that offline and over coffee or a drink, is we'll talk about that resilience. Because it piqued your interest. I can tell. I know you that well. Yeah. And then from that insight, we'll say, gee, how can we instill resilience in your people? It's a tough time. What can you learn? How can we do that without cramming it down their throat? Be resilient. You're employee number 17.
Right. So I'm trying to get it. And people are really, like, I see Matt Wickstrand just wrote, be compelling, not convincing, my new favorite quote. Convincing feels like maybe an argumentative or transactional, like you were saying before. Compelling, maybe you're leading them more to the point. Is that what you're based? Am I interpreting it correctly? So trying to be, and a way to be more compelling is to give them the facts and then maybe let them chew on it a little bit, let it meditate out there for a little bit and sink in. Is that the technique?
Well, compelling, I think, and this is the responsibility of visionary CEOs, coming up with a vision that no one else, that never would have happened, but that people will want to be a part of to make it happen. That's compelling. That's like the famous story of the three people in medieval times who are banging on rocks. And you ask one person, what are you doing? Well, I'm banging on rocks. And the other one, I forget what the second one says, but the third one says, I'm building a cathedral. And so what is the vision that you will see for them? Now, I know this is about tech world, but since I do write for Huffington Post, I can't get off being a little political. Right. And I was thinking, like, the vision that I would love Obama to say is, and I have children, and you're about to have one, if my children love their children the way I love my children, if someone said to me, let's envision the world that your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren, who you'll never see, are born into. Let's envision that world. When they're born into this world, it's a world in which they don't have to worry about health care, in which they don't have to worry about the environment, in which they don't have to worry that if they work hard, that they'll have a job. Think of how you love your children, how they're going to love their children. What about that vision? I'm already seeing, your eyes are getting a little moist because it's touching you. And then that's a great vision. So now let's use that and work backwards. How do we make that a reality? And then what happened is, I think that's a way to inhibit a lot of the zero-sum pissing matches, if you will,
the clog modems.
Yeah, the clog modems.
Right. I mean, people are basically talking at each other. They're entrenched in their positions. There's no listening going on, and there's no space between them to actually say, "Gosh, what is this? Is there any common ground? And what is this person really trying to accomplish?" I mean, it seems like sometimes people get so transactional in their relationships between things, they don't actually have a goal. It's like.
The goal becomes winning as opposed to it being meaningful. How I transitioned into the business world is for many years I did house calls to dying patients, and a number of those were founders of companies, and some of those were the heads of big corporations. And one of the things that I did at the 11th hour was try to help them gain some peace of mind and help their families come together, and that's why their second generation brought me in to sort of bring the company together. But more than a few individuals, and I'll tell you a story of one CEO that we all know and loved, and I said to him, "Why do you seem so unhappy? Because I don't think it's because you're dying, because you've been dying as long as I've known you." I mean, that's when I came in. And he says, "I don't know that I've ever done anything important." And I said, "What? You have a hospital named after you? You've got all the, you've created an industry." And he looked at me and he smiled, and he was known for his wry sense of humor, and he said, "Don't con a con man, especially when he's dying. I have all the love that money can buy, and that's all it's worth." I also may have outsmarted myself because I thought I could drink and smoke, and here I am dying of liver cancer in my 50s. So I might just have missed the boat. So I think what happened is he had a transactionally He had a wealthy life, but he wasn't rich.
Interesting. So one of the questions somebody was talking about in the chat room here was the chaotic nature of startup companies and actually trying to get through to people in the chaos and the war room that is it. What are some tips for people on how they can get people out of the war, out of the servers going down and the madness that is some startup companies to have these moments of maybe listening to each other and communicating with each other? Can it happen inside of a company? Do you have to get people off-site to really listen to each other? I mean, are there techniques where when it's madness in the room, there's some way for people to say, like, let's have a deep conversation about this. Let's make this less transactional. Let's unclog the modems. Do you have techniques for people that they can use?
Well,
I mean, we're going to basically say here, I can see it now, the employees are going to be like, can we unplug our modems for a second and just listen to each other and really talk about the core issue here? I mean, maybe that's a good way to do it.
Well, I'll give you an odd technique, which probably won't translate because you don't know the person that gave it to me. It's a fellow named Dr. Michael Gervais. And if you go to Pinnacle Performer, I think it's Pinnacle-Performer, he's one of the leading sports psychologists in the country, and he helps top athletes perform under extreme pressure. He has an all-star athlete in every major sport, and he trains combat pilots. And the other day, he was telling me about an exercise that he gives people to stay centered just before they jump off the diving box, just before they enter into a combat mission. And it'll sound kind of hokey, but you could imagine doing it. What he says, and we don't have the time because we're rushed here, he says, what I want you to do is I want you to just sort of, wherever you are, just rock and imagine yourself finding a center point. And then when you find it, execute. Now, what I find fascinating about that, because I'm a neuroscientist and I have a lot of interest, and my book has a lot of neuroscience in it, I thought, wow, autistic kids rock and they don't stop rocking. And the reason is I don't think they can find a center point out in the world to connect with. I mean, I just got the chills thinking of that. I don't know if you did. And so part of what he took us through an exercise, and it was fascinating. Now, again, you have to believe in this. It can't just be a tactical exercise. Okay, everyone get off their modem and start rocking. I mean, you know, they'll arrest you.
Right.
But it made so much sense, and when he said that, just imagine it. And then
interesting,
find
Bill
a center
Gates does
point.
that. Bill Gates has a rocking thing.
Really?
Yeah.
But does
it's
he, but
pretty
does he
much
get,
known for it.
Does he get centered, or does Melissa say, Bill, you're doing it again?
I really don't understand. I really don't know what's going on there. But when you look at those leaders, it's an interesting one. Do you have any sort of insights? I mean, you talked about Gates and you talked about
Jobs.
Jobs also seems to be like a massive control freak with the nobody can talk about, nobody can blog at the company, and everything's got to be very precise, and you can't have different types of software on it. Is there this sort of, the word I always hear about entrepreneurs is narcissistic personality disorder. I've had like 5 people tell me I have narcissistic personality disorder. Is this like common amongst them? Do I have that? Is that?
Well, again,
what does that even mean?
Okay, I'm gonna take a lot of heat for this, but you know, what the heck, from the medical community.
Right.
I think what's happened is the world is rewarding people who tend towards Asperger's syndrome. And Asperger's syndrome is high-functioning autism. It's really used in the wrong way, but what it means is being goal-oriented to a fault. And so, in other words, you don't wake up intending to give people a hard time. What happens is you wake up with a clarity of vision, mission, strategy, tactics. It's all aligned. And then when it gets pulled off course, you're not able to move the ball forward. And so I think what's happened is the world is reinforcing those people, but many of them are having problems at home. Their kids are saying, you know, dad, or in some cases mom's a jerk. The spouse is making all these excuses to the kids. Well, you know, that's just dad. He works hard and he's being successful for all of us. But then those kids grow up and they say, yeah, he may be successful for all of us, but he's still a jerk. And I think what's happening is, given this transactionally myopic world, you know, find the deal, do the deal, next deal, and get rewarded for that. Who cares about the value of the company? Let's just do the deal. I think what happens is it's rewarding people who can be so goal-oriented that nothing gets them off course, But I think when you're interacting with people, every founder or CEO that I work with is not abusive by intention, meaning they're just trying to get the job done. They don't know any better. I won't work with someone who takes delight in abusing people. I just won't.
So they're not masochists, but
or sadists.
Or sadists, or whatever. Sadists, rather. They're just so driven to get the job done, and they've been reinforced through the people who are sort of Asperger's, or whatever you want to call it, driven jerks. They've been reinforced because they get the venture capital, they get the investment, they get the attention, and so they might just plow through people in order to get to that goal. And everybody forgives them because, well, they're getting it done.
Yeah, and the shareholder value. So this is a quote I just made up, which often means I'll live to regret it. Just like there's no honor amongst thieves,
right?
There's no caring for humanity amongst incredibly goal-driven people.
Right.
They say, we'll get around to it.
Yeah, and the
we'll make a lot of
justify
money.
the means. I mean, if we are all enjoying the iPhone and it's brilliant, do we care? If there's 100 million people enjoying the iPhone, do we care that there are 10 engineers who got yelled at by Steve Jobs and they cried because it wasn't, the battery life wasn't long enough? Or is that a good enough price to pay?
Well, we selectively, what's happening is we're envious of those who are goal-oriented to a fault, so we find a way to ignore the body count.
Interesting. And also, if you're destroying that many people in the process of creating something great, by the time you get to the end of your life, it's not going to feel like much success like the person you had who was dying of cancer. So somebody like Jobs or whoever, I'm going to talk about him because I don't know him, but a person of that ilk who was totally driven and ran over a bunch of people, they make it to the end and realize, gee, I got the G5, but I'm not very happy with who I am as a person. I mean, it's kind of terrifying for a CEO to realize winning might actually be losing. And the more you've won, by definition, the more you've lost.
Well, as that CEO said to me, he said, I have all the money, I have all the love that money can buy, but people are afraid of me. In the latter years of my life, when I served on boards, people didn't care about my input, they just cared about my money. They just cared about who I could bring in to the board. And I did that because I liked being in the game, because I just couldn't play golf and tennis 9,000 hours a week. But maybe I may have outsmarted myself because the people I care about don't know that I care about them, and now I've run out of time.
Kind of brutal.
That's just honest.
Yeah. Wow. It's heavy stuff.
We can't keep meeting like this.
I know. It's brutal. There was a time, I think, when, as a CEO, I was so driven that I felt like people, don't worry about it. Didn't even go on camera.
Am I going to get electrocuted? Okay.
No, you'll be fine. I think I was so driven that I actually thought, if a couple of people get burned out by this, it's probably what's necessary in order to achieve something great. In order to reach our full potential, there's going to be some casualties. And now I realize maybe there doesn't need to be casualties. You can actually, if somebody would be a casualty because they couldn't keep up, you can actually just not have them on the team. This is a major revelation for me between different companies where I actually thought that I had to keep people who weren't performing on the level in an honorable way in terms of being compelling, like they weren't honoring their talent or they didn't have talent or didn't have drive. I actually thought that it was my job to give them the drive. Is this a mistake, like to try to be, as a CEO, the psychologist for the people who work for you? Like I used to actually be like, this person has got a block, I got to try to get them motivated, they don't realize their potential. And now I don't even do that. I'm just like, if the person does not fit this prototypical person that I want to work with, driven, good conversationalist, social, positive energy, not an Eeyore, not a jerk, not an a-hole who's going to, be abrasive to other people. What I found was once I just started getting rid of the wrong type of people and just had the right type of people, I didn't have to be that guy. It was easier for me And I realized I was being that guy because I had people who just weren't good enough to sort of fit in the company. And I was trying to put these people into, I was like trying to put somebody who on Delta Force who couldn't even make it through Boy Scouts. And I'm trying to make them a ranger. This person couldn't even get to the Weeblos.
No, and I think that's okay. As I get to this stage of my life, and I am honored to be connected to some of the top respected people probably in the world, what's happening is I so admire them because they're strong, they're passionate, they do the right thing. What's happened is it's increased my repulsion for all the lazy people, the entitled people who don't do the right thing ever. And so what's happened is it's made it easier for me to not let those people in my life to begin with. And then my book is filled with techniques about how to deal with the ones who already got into your life, who are grandfathered in, and you have to deal with them without getting abusive or over the top. And there are ways to do that, which we maybe will be the topic for another This Week in Startups.
I think that's a really important one, is what do you do with people who you grandfathered into your company and you don't want to have with there anymore?
Here's a tip. One of the best management tips that I've ever heard. It comes from a friend of mine named Stan Barkey, who was a senior manager at State Farm. And he said, you want to leverage the future that no one has messed up yet as much as possible, because when you bring up the past, everyone's on the defensive. Even if it was something good, people are saying, well, it's good now, but then you're going to rip my throat out next week. So the way he would say that is after you delegate something to someone, and then he would say is, what do you understand about what I told you, why it's important? And then what he would say, and I'd suggest anybody in a leadership position to say this whenever you delegate it to someone else, going forward, in the event, for whatever reason, you're not able to do what you just agreed to do, how do you want me to be with you if my main concern is getting it done as opposed to being punitive, shaming, and then hear whatever they say. They might say, don't humiliate me in front of other people. Take me aside. Some people might say, look, I'm ADD, take me into my cubicle when no one's looking and shake me by the shoulders because that'll get through to me, or say to me, get it done by today. And then what I'd suggest to people is repeat that back to them, even though your tendency is not, got it, okay, I'll do that. You say, well, this is very important because I don't want to get as angry as you as I'm capable of being. So what you're saying is if you don't do what I've just suggested, what I've just directed you to do, by such and such time, this is how you want me to be with you that will most efficiently get you back to doing it.
So you're basically putting it on them to say, listen, in the case that you don't hit the target, you don't hit the sales number, the site's not ready to launch on that date, what do you want my reaction to be?
Absolutely.
Do you want me to go crazy and break and then
the key
computer,
is,
or do you want me to just take you aside and take you for a walk and buy you lunch and give you a motivational talk?
We'll see what they say. But the key is repeat it back to them and say, is that correct? And wait for the confirmatory yes. And the reason being, and I write about this in the book about the cascade of yes, when you can get a confirmatory yes from someone, when they say yes, that's it, it increases their motivation to comply with that by 25%. And that's different than a Can you feel the energy? It's like saying,
it's interesting because I do sort of, when I'm talking to people, say like, I make them say like yes or no, or like give a definitive answer. Please listen to the question I'm asking. This is the thing that makes me crazy about young people. They never actually listen to the question their bosses ask. They answer a different question. I'll ask, how are we doing with Project X? And they'll say, Project Y has taken 5 times longer than I expected. And then I say, well, I have the same question. How are we doing with Project X? Does that mean Project X didn't start? Does that mean Project X is half done? Are you telling me why Project X hasn't started? What is that feature in people and where they don't want to actually, they don't actually listen to the question being asked of them?
Here's a big problem for an ADD world, even ADD founders and CEOs. And I credit a friend of mine, Billy Pittard. Go to Pittard Inc. and check out his reel. He was one of the, his company, Pittard Sullivan, was one of the great branding companies of media. But one of the things that he said that I think is really important is unless you're specific in defining the expectations and parameters for success, the other person will define their own expectations and they will be wrong. And so they're going to put a lot of effort into doing something that was not clear from the beginning. So when he would meet with someone and say, you know, this needs to have more color, he'd need to be more specific. This needs more yellow. We need to, you know, from your palette, put in more blues. Where if he says it needs to be more colorful, there's nothing more discouraging than not being explicit in those expectations, and the person works so hard, and then you say, nah, I don't like it. But a lot of times, you know, big picture thinking founders or CEOs, they're not that specific because they want to get on to the next thing. So you got it, yeah, and you'll do it, but it's got to be something that you can both visualize.
Yeah, I think taking the time to be specific with certain people, if you do that enough, I find that they can transform into another type of person, which is the one where they finish your sentence and they understand how you think. And so there's a contingent of people who have worked for me who feel they understand how Jason would approach a problem, how his reaction would be. And so the senior members of my staff, Tyler, Mark, whatever, Elliot, they'll say, or Lon, this is how Jason would probably approach it when they're talking to people who are new to the company. Here's how his logic would be. And then when they bring me in to actually discuss it, if it actually gets to my level and we're actually discussing it, they'll say, that's exactly how I thought you would approach it. Because I take the time now, which I didn't do in my first two companies really, to say, this is my thought process. This could be the right answer. This could be the wrong answer. Here's why. And this realization that there isn't necessarily one right answer, which I find is just a disease of many people. They get entrenched and they think, this is the right answer. When they don't realize there might be 5 or 6 right answers. There are 7 different ways to bake a cake, 7 different ways to make grilled cheese, 1,700 ways to make grilled cheese. All of them could be delicious. So it doesn't actually matter. It matters which one you pick. It matters ultimately picking one and getting there, and then maybe iterating and iterating and iterating on top of it. That's the ego that I think kills most founders. They just think that they know this is the right answer. And maybe they're really smart and they have it, but what they also don't realize is there might be 7 other ones. So the people they're actually discussing it with, everybody at the table might be a winner. Everybody at the table might have a winning solution. So then it's not picking amongst what's the right answer. It's picking amongst the 5 best. There's 5 great answers. Let's pick the 2 best and let's figure out which one we're going to go with. And if it doesn't work, we'll just monitor it and we'll change direction.
I'll bet those people who, your senior people, you don't have to micromanage because
not at all.
Because I'll bet you have a feeling that you understand how they're going to get somewhere. And I think that's another problem for founders is they not only say here's the goal, but they say do it my way, and then they often can't even articulate what their way is because it's so intuitively ingrained. I mean, what I tried to do with Just Listen was break down how is it that I understand people at different levels, it's gotten some very good reviews, so I think I've accomplished it. You know, not to the level that I'd like it to be, but how do you break down becoming intuitive about understanding the unsaid in people?
Interesting. The intuitive thing is interesting. I think the greatest compliment an entrepreneur can have is when the people who work with them, the people they surround with them, can intuit what they're thinking. If they can, while you're riffing on an idea or discussing something, actually get to the place you're going to go before you get there as an entrepreneur, that's magic because it takes so much pressure off you. And
it saves so much time.
Right.
And avoids so much grief.
You know what I find with micromanaging? I did the micromanaging thing for my first company. I did less in the second company. In this company, if I am micromanaging somebody, I just realized I hired the wrong person.
Absolutely.
If they can't get it done without me micromanaging them, that to me is the red flag now. So if it's the 3rd time I'm having to micromanage some issue and one of my lieutenants who intuits what I would do and I intuit what they would do and we're in sync as to what the business needs, if we're all having to micromanage that person, we've either not hired the right person or not been clear enough with them, but we're pretty clear about what we need and want. So once you get to that micromanaging point, it's over. You have to get rid of them quickly. I mean, this is one of the things I think we had a discussion about a couple of years ago was if you stop rooting for the person, gosh, how can they be there?
But I think part of it is you have to be self-aware of how you're coming off. There's actually a sheet and a handout there that people pick up about when you're out of touch with who you are. So in other words, if you think you're merely being adamant, but what you're experienced as is frightening. When you're thinking that you're being enthusiastic, but what you're experienced is being immature. If you think you're being detail-oriented, but what you're experienced as is nitpicking, it creates what I talk about in the book, dissonance. And dissonance means when what you see and hear doesn't match what you feel, or my definition is dissonance is what are you going to do for me divided by what are you going to do to me.
It's interesting. I had no idea that I could be scary to people who work for me because I sit next to them, I talk to anybody, I eat lunch with them. I just assume since I'm available to everybody and I'm not like one of those CEOs who's in a private office, why would anybody be scared of me? Until you realize that somebody, Mark Jeffrey, who I've worked with for a long time, was one of my oldest friends before we're here, said, you can be really scary to people. That person might just be scared of you, and when you talk to them and you start asking them questions, they're scared to death because you could be intimidating. And I'm like, really? How can I be intimidating? I don't understand that. I'm not raising my voice. I'm just asking targeted questions, and I'm trying to get the information out of them and figure out what the direction to go is. But you really underestimate your presence because of that title as the founder, because of the CEO title. You're just inherently intimidating to, or can be, to people.
Well, I think what it is because you come from a place of good intentions, you're amazed that anyone cannot see that. So for many CEOs in their personal lives, they are seen as jerks by their spouses or their kids or their teenage kids, but their teenage kids think of everyone as a jerk. But often what will happen is you could say, how can my kid think I'm trying to hurt them? I love them. And often the adamant CEO shows his or her caring by solving things, when often the people in your life, both personally and professionally, just want to feel listened to because they have this head of steam which is clogging their modem.
Right.
And one of the reasons I think listening is the best way to unclog a person/modem is because, see, when you unplug a modem and then it relaxes, that's the equivalent of doing yoga, exercising, and unplugging that way. Why I think listening works much better is because I think you want to exchange like for like, and often what clogs the modems we're talking about is people not listening to you, presuming, demanding, pushing into you, cornering you, slapping you around verbally, and that's why when someone actually listens to you, it totally reverses it. Maybe something that I can mention here, which I mention in the book, and it's a term that I hope I'm interviewed on because I'm sort of smitten by it. It's something that I call mirror neuron receptor deficit. And mirror neurons are brain cells in our cortex that are responsible for imitation, learning, and empathy. So when someone yawns and you yawn, your
right.
mirror neuron is firing. Yeah. Now my view is that we spend our life conforming to the outside world, but what we have a hunger is for the outside world to conform to us. So we develop this deficit. Our mirror neurons want to be cared about when we're conforming to the world. And that's why when someone actually does care about you and says, "Are you okay?" When you start to cry with genuine caring kindness, it reverses the mirror neuron receptor deficit. It closes it because the world has given you back something that is previously taken away. And I mean, that's my personal value system is I think that works better than yoga. I'm not against yoga or exercising.
Right, but that's a solitary thing that sort of maybe clears your mind, but actually being listened to that's the best drug of all. I mean, if somebody's actually attentively listening to you and what you think or what's troubling you, this is the best possible thing for a CEO to do. Absolutely.
And when I've asked people, think of any breakthrough that you've ever had in your career, your professional, your personal life, any breakthrough that involved people. Did it involve being listened to and finally that someone got where you're coming from? And almost everyone says, absolutely.
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. So now I got to spend the next 2 weeks listening to 35 people explain to me everything that they're going through.
They're all going to say, you shouldn't have had him on because you're not listening, Jason.
Exactly.
Go read his book.
All right. We should. We've gone an hour and 10 minutes. We've got a bunch of people out here who probably want to meet you, and maybe we'll sign some books and have a little something to eat. This was a bonus episode. We just did this on a Tuesday. We have the regular show Friday, which we're doing from Santa Barbara at a music conference, and I'm going to interview the CEO of Sonos, which is a very cool company that actually launched on Engadget. Those music home systems, very cool guy. And thanks to the sponsors of This Week in Startups, everybody knows who they are: DNA Mail, WebSpy, Ustream, and Audible_com on Twitter. So thank them on Twitter. This is like my new idea for advertising. You'd like this as a psychologist, a psychiatrist. I have the people who watch the show thank the sponsors.
Ooh.
So they go on Twitter and they actually say, thank you to @DNA Mail, @WebSpy, @Ustream, and @Audible_com for sponsoring This Week in Startups. So, I thank them. Of course I'm going to thank them. They make this possible. These lights cost 15 grand just for the lights in this room. It's not cheap to do this, or to do it well. But to have the actual audience thank them, they're like, not only do you remember my name, but you're thanking me?
That's
gratitude.
Yeah.
So that's the psychology there.
Yeah.
I'm using psychology.
Also, if people
What I learned from you.
if people are interested, if you go to justlistenthebook.com.
Justlistenthebook.com.
And if you sign up for something called free resources, there are things there that you can't get anywhere else. And there's a series that people like called two questions. You can't get it anywhere else. And like, for instance, there's 2 questions to get people to respect you and treat you better, because I think it's one thing to be trusted, it's another thing to be respected. When people trust you, they listen to you. When they respect you, they do what you want them to do. And so you can find those secrets.
And the book's already a bestseller on Amazon, which is kind of cool.
That is cool.
A lot of people have pre-ordered the book, and it's out now.
It's out now?
It's out now. So everybody go to Just Listen the Book. If you enjoy the conversation, Twitter that you enjoy the conversation with Mark Goulston, and justlistenthebook.com. Maybe you get some inbound links. And so we'll see everybody. Thank you, Mark, for being on the program. Awesome. And congratulations on the book.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for all the great advice over the years. And thank you to everybody watching the program. We will see you on Friday on This Week in Startups.
With this time.